So good morning or good afternoon or good evening wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to introduce you to Shaynalee coaching and talent development strategist Shayna McDonough. Is that correct? Welcome, Shayna.
Hi, good to be here, Karen. Thank you. Yes, that is correct. McDonough, very good.
Okay, so firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. Can you please give us some background on your entrepreneurial journey?
Sure. I've been an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, as I like to say, for a few years now. And prior to that, I started my career out as a teacher. And then I was substitute teaching, just kind of filling in. And then I went to grad school. And while in grad school, I worked in nonprofit in a quality management capacity. So I was doing a lot of compliance and contract and grant management. And then I moved to New York City after grad school. And well, I did some grad school in New York as well. And I worked at the United Nations in peace and conflict resolution, which was really interesting, and came back to New England to finish up. And then I moved to New York, and I worked in New York City government for 8 years, five of which I was supporting the professional development and academic growth goals of domestic violence victims who were receiving services through the New York City Department of the Mayor's Office to Combat Domestic Violence. And from there, were very gratifying but daunting work. I transitioned into a different city agency where I was supporting the talent needs of the growing tech sector in workforce development. So that was really interesting and just inspired by doing the work of professional development at all different levels and working specifically in the entrepreneurial sector, which really, motivated me because of the innovation and just the grit behind it. And I was at a point in my career where I was ready to pivot out of government and do something different. And I started taking a coaching course, and it kind of made sense given my background in professional development to do career coaching, which became executive level coaching. And so I took the leap and I quit my full-time government secure job and went out into my own and started a coaching business. And here I am.
Wow, amazing. So that leads me to the next question. So you obviously touched on it now, so I don't know if this would be the same point, but basically you are a talent development strategist and organizational growth consultant. So can you please share with us more about this for those who don't know what that is?
Sure. So for the executive level professionals that I work with, they hire me as individuals, and many of them are high-level professionals in well-established companies who just are feeling that they've outgrown their company, and a lot of them might be just fine in their job, but just wanting to do something different or up-level or move into a different role. And so they hire me for counsel around that. I do a lot of interview coaching and just helping folks peel back the layers to determine who they are as a professional at this point in their career and what their next step is. And a lot of it is confidence building, and you'd be surprised for all of the success these individuals have achieved. They're still, many of them who hire me are still very much kind of suffering from imposter syndrome, like, how did I get here? Am I really supposed to be at this level? Where do I go next? And so we coach around that, and thankfully, all of the folks that I've worked with pretty much have successfully transitioned into new roles or up-leveled into a different company. And then from there, I started working with, actually one of my executive clients referred me to a company. And so then I started working with small businesses, and they would hire me to kind of assess their organizational goals, specifically as it relates to talent development and performance management. So the people functions of the business, okay, we're a startup and we've been operating for 5 years and we have a decent budget, but we haven't really thought about our culture or our people yet. We've all just been kind of doing what we do to make us generate revenue to this point, and now we're growing, so we probably should have some systems in place. So I come in and do an assessment of both from what the leader's perspective and what they feel like they need as an organization to grow in terms of the talent and the performance, and also from the employee's perspective and where they feel they need to be better supported to grow with the company, or what's not clear, or what they think should be better established in the company so that they can perform at a higher level. And so I help them think of strategies. Once we get that data in place, I do some coaching or workshops, and we create strategies to kind of start to shape what a people function system should look like based on the needs of that organization.
Wow, that's incredible. And it's obviously there's a lot of moving parts to that as well. So, um,
There is.
so there is a big focus on leadership or lack of leadership. What would you say is unique about your leadership style? And do you have examples of this, and how has this worked for you and your clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one of my favorite topics, I think, because I'm a student of many influencers in this space who are speaking about best practice leadership qualities. And I think the way that I've always approached leadership is from the perspective of the person on the other end of that leadership style. And so instead of coming in from the highest level and saying, here's what I think you need, I think, what did I need from my leader to feel supported? What did I wish they heard me on? Because I'm a very ambitious self-starter. And so if only I had, this kind of leadership, maybe I would have been even better, right? And so I come from that perspective of how can I serve these individuals, and I have to get a consensus of what they need before I start prescribing what they need. And I think, of course, from every perspective, you go into a company and the CEO, and they're going to set the strategic vision, and they're going to kind of have a place for where they want the company to go. So it's not to push back against that that's part of leadership as well, is knowing what you want and making sure that folks are meeting that standard. But to really cultivate people and to generate high performance, it's about, assessing where everybody is and what they need and making sure that the expectations are clear. So for me, leadership really starts at communication and making sure that we have set a standard for what performance looks like, what's expected of you, how often we check in about that expectation, and then separately, let's also set a standard for how are we developing you and what do you need from me, what works for this company in you and what doesn't, and how can we make this experience really great. And a specific example is just thinking about, sometimes how leaders are disconnected from an organization. I taught a class once, and an individual had said, a business owner, yeah, no, our communication's pretty good. I think we're fine. Everybody seems to know, what's expected and all of that. And certainly at the end of class, he kind of was like, maybe they don't know. I'm not sure now. Now you have me second guessing. Why don't you come to my company? And so, it's like, so what do you think we need? And the first thing I say is, well, let's survey the teams and let's see what the people need. And let's see if they're on the same page as you think they are. And sure enough, we found that people were, when we did a branding question, what does the company do? We had 35 different answers. And they were surprised by that, the leadership team, because they thought they were pretty clear about what they did, but various functions of the company maybe weren't aware of everything. And so it was just stepping back and assessing what's happening here, and then how can we make sure that we're being consistent and clear, we're communicating, the lines of communication are open, we're hearing what people need, we're inspiring and motivating high performance.
Wow, amazing. So that leads me to the next question. Can you please share with us some of your biggest lessons and learnings within your career?
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I read some of the questions. And I think, again, it goes back to communication. If I really think about myself as a young professional, I'm a thinker, but I'm also a talker. I always say I think fast, I move fast, and I talk fast, or I say too much, too soon, too often. That's my other one. Too much, too soon, too often. And, what I learned over the years is how to rein that in. And, people would advise me when I was coming up in my career about my approach. I could be somewhat flippant and very direct. And for me, it was all about being connected to my authenticity. But this is real. Like, I'm not going to put on for different people at different places. But ultimately, I learned that that's absolutely what you need to do, not only for your own professional growth, but to get people to meet you where they are. If you come in like a bull and you're not able to really step back and listen, how does this person receive messages best? And how can I frame my message in a way that they understand it, so that we're getting to the point that I want to get to, instead of, just saying what I want to say and hoping it gets across, or really just saying too much when instead I could be listening and not getting involved in the gossip. So learning all of those things through experience and kind of looking back on it, and now interfacing with with people at different levels in the professional space is it served me well to think more about listening than just shooting from the hip.
Yes, exactly. No, it makes sense. And leading from that, what would you say have been some of your biggest career highlights?
Well, honestly, I feel like each point of my career led me to where I am today. And again, going back to the lessons, if you look back, I didn't choose any path except this current one. I really didn't choose any role that I've been in. I kind of just landed in them. And
Okay.
so I always felt like I'm not where I'm supposed to be. But looking back, if I hadn't had that experience, learning how to do data synthesis, then maybe it wouldn't have served me when I was creating a program where I had to do data reports for government, right? So I think working in New York City government was definitely a highlight because it's the biggest municipal government in the country, and you really start, understanding how city government works is really important in all professional levels, and it operates very much like a corporation, serving victims of domestic violence and watching many of the women that I supported move from situations that were very traumatic and damaging into ones that they were able to sustain their self-sufficiency was super valuable. And of course, working within the growing tech sector of New York City was amazing and really kind of inspired me to do what I do now. And I'd say being an entrepreneur has been quite an experience, and just like doing what I love, finding now all these years it took me to be in the talent development space and helping businesses focus on a people first culture. That's really that's the biggest highlight for me.
Amazing. So you have a passion for social impact and a business advisor for social enterprise Greenhouse. Can you please share with us how this came about, and where did your passion for coaching and making a difference to others start?
Sure. So like I said, I had lived in New York for 10 years, and when I had started my business, I was there for about a year and a half in my business, and just coming up on 10 years in the city, I decided to, it was time for a change in my life and wanting to reconnect with my roots. So I moved back to New England, where I'm from, still doing my business, but most of my executive clients were in New York and a few of my business clients there as well. And so I wanted to expand my network here in New England. And so I started looking for organizations where I could, be of value. And I saw the Social Enterprise Greenhouse, which is basically an incubator and an accelerator for entrepreneurs who are developing business models or 501c3s in the social impact space, so health and wellness and hospitality. And I just filled out a form to become an advisor, and I went and met the program person over there, and we had a lot of synergy between us. And I was initially going to do workshops, but then it just became something where I would help her think about program strategy for developing entrepreneurial programs, because it's similar to what we did in New York. And then I started working as an advisor to the businesses that were going through their incubator and accelerator programs. It's been really, really rewarding. And so how I became a coach, when I was taking the coach certification program and had decided I was going to, leave my job and do this full time, part-time job, part-time results, so I went for it. I called a friend of many, many years and said, yeah, I'm going to be a coach. And she was like, yeah, whatever, Shayna, you've been a coach for 30 plus years. So it's kind of that's the role that I've always played. And it's funny that it didn't really occur to me until way later on, just a few years ago, that this is something that's a profession, it's a viable profession for me. But I've always been and still am the person that everybody in my family and all my friends and social circle comes to me like, can you help me with a resume? Or I have this problem, can you help me figure it out? And I don't feel drained by it. I can't help myself. They know if they don't come to me, I'm going to be bad, because I want to, get in there and make I always want to help people maximize their potential. And it's just part of who I am. So it made sense for me to pursue this career path.
Amazing, amazing. So the market for coaching seems to be oversaturated. Everyone is a coach or an author. What would you say separates you from others? And can you please give us some tangible examples of the success you've had?
Sure. I've grown to love this question because I use it a lot when I advise businesses in terms of sketching out their value proposition. But when I first started my business, I hated this question. And I used to say, because I'm Shayna McDonough, that's why. And you know what? If I think back on it and really this is how I coach the businesses through this as well. It's true, right? Yeah. I'm a solopreneur, so I don't have necessarily a huge business function, like a product or service that multi-person team would have. But, you know, there's only one person with my DNA. So while there might be many coaches who are executive coaches and maybe they worked in HR and they have the same or more expertise that I do in the tactical piece, they don't come to the table with my personality makeup, right? So they don't have the, perhaps they're really good in one area that you know I'm different in. I mean, I come to the table with curiosity. I am a naturally curious person, so I know how to ask the right questions, to peel back those layers, to meet people where they are. And it takes me, I've always been somebody, I'm a good reader. So in like a minute after talking to someone and asking them a few questions, I have a pretty good sense of who they are, what they need, and how to intervene with the right remedies to help them move forward. And, you know, sense of humor and all of the things that make me me. I'm a very empathetic person, and you'll see in my client testimonials, that's one of the key things that I'm most proud of that everyone says is that I care. I care about my clients, and I do. But I'm also very direct. So I could be called Sergeant Shayna and the same time as like giving people a hug, because I keep people accountable. You know, so I think it's this kind of, what makes me unique is that I'm a unique and authentic individual who's providing a service that many other people provide, but they don't have my exact makeup of how I do it. And what speaks to that especially is I was just doing some looking at my client roster data, and like 60% of my clients have come back for additional services, and like 30% have come back more than twice. And so when that happens, yeah, you know that like they could have gone somewhere else if they weren't satisfied, but they're coming back for phase 2, phase 3. And so that, you know, speaks to, I guess, what my value proposition is.
Amazing. So how do you believe having worked in companies and then going on your own helped you? And what do you believe you can do better as an entrepreneur from the skills you developed?
Well, I think one thing that I used to think it was a coincidence, but it might all be by design now that I think about it. I worked in the nonprofit sector, in the public sector, and through my work in the public sector, I was interfacing with the private sector. So I have had a dose of everything. But one thing specifically is the roles that I've had have all been very different from each other, but they've all been newly created roles, as in, or like a pilot program. So every role that I've ever been hired for was like, hey, we want to create this position called a blank. Can you make that happen? And so having that experience and having been able to step into an idea and fully operationalize a concept into a functional like program, when I became an entrepreneur, that, you know, I have this idea, but where do you go from there, right? So I was so familiar with that part of it, being a very self-directed, okay, how do I operationalize this? Well, I have to create a menu and I have to create prices, and I have, and also in government, you know, it's very much like a startup in some ways, you could say, because you're working on tight deadlines, you're under-resourced, you have loads of work, you're wearing many hats, and that too was a huge value add when I became an entrepreneur and I had to, or solopreneur, and I had to, you know, become the marketer and the finance person and the sales. I did a lot of business development when I was in my previous role. I had to convince employers to let us, you know, help them find their talent and to participate in our program, become our partner. And so all of those skills helped me sell my services and build out my services. And I don't think without having done that in all my different roles that I would have been as successful as I was so soon into creating my business, because it all came very naturally to me to build those functions out.
Amazing. So social media has impacted our lives and changed and shifted so much. How do you believe that this has changed your business in both a positive and negative way? And what do you believe we can do better?
So I don't know negative, but I would say that something to be careful of in any professional setting, entrepreneur or working for an employer, is, you know, I really had to monitor my my social network platform in terms of my personal life, because I'm putting myself out there as a professional and creating this brand. And I wanted to be very mindful about separating who I was as a person to who my professional persona was. I really didn't, you know, you want people to take you seriously and you want to be legitimized in your profession. And so if they are seeing you like with your family and your friends and partying, it's not, it's harder, I think, to make that distinction if those lines are blurred. So that was one thing that I was very cognizant of, and probably limited my personal social media use a bit when I became an entrepreneur. But what's been really positive is LinkedIn. I mean, now most of my clients are referral based, which is really great, and I'm really happy about that. But when I first started, every single client that I enrolled was a relationship that was created through LinkedIn. And I've been through networking events and shaking hands and passing out cards, and still every single client was a referral through LinkedIn. So I think it's a huge positive step. I think what could be done better, especially on LinkedIn, it's again becoming oversaturated, and I did it too. I was guilty of it, of kind of randomly reaching out to strangers and doing this kind of broad value add. It's kind of 101 what they teach you when you're starting a small business, is especially as a solopreneur in any field, kind of reach out and say, hey, this would be great. But as now someone whose business is thriving and I don't really need that service right now, it's frustrating to get I'm like inundated with like sales pitches. And so
yeah, that's the worst. I mean, even
right?
on Facebook, you know, I get that as well. And then people off the bat start trying to sell you things. It's crazy.
Yeah. I wish there was a way to filter that out, or like some, and you know, I don't know what the answer is, because I think the engagement is really important. And as I'm sure you too, like you network with people in these platforms legitimately. So you don't want to put such a restriction on it, what I think LinkedIn had at the beginning, to where you have these walls and now you can never penetrate those walls and get connected to somebody you might not have met. But you know, I just wish there was like some kind of screening process to ensure that like people were connecting, and even on the flip side, when it's not a sales pitch, when it's a genuine like need or interest or connection, I wish that people were more open to like you and I, right? We were introduced by a mutual person in common, and you know, for me, it was like not, well, this person isn't doing what I can't get anything out of this right now. It was like, let me speak to this individual, because you just never know what that new connection can bring. So I think creating, I don't know, some kind of better funnel or filtering system to make sure that people who should connect are connecting, and people who are just kind of like using it as a robocall platform, that they're not able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your career, you've had a passion for working with students. How did this come about, and what has your core focus, what is your core focus been, and can you please share with us more about that?
Sure. I think students is a good term, because I've actually worked as like an instructor or teacher in a teaching and advising capacity for people at all ages. I actually started in college. I was teaching ESL to adults as like an internship, and I worked as a grad assistant in the math lab. Oddly, math was my worst subject as a kid. I got better at it in high school, and then during college, I was like working in all these capacities as a math teacher. It was really strange. Yeah, I don't know. And I taught, you know, like a 7th and 8th grade charter school. And then, you know, now when I was in New York, the talent that we were sourcing for my particular programs were all university level students. And now I teach business owners through an adult ed program at a local university. I think the key thing for me is I love to engage people in the learning process, because I'm a learner. And again, just like with leadership, thinking about how do I want to be led, I teach like specifically even with adults really, but I think at any age, how do I want to be in a classroom? How do I want to absorb information, and how am I going to stay engaged? And when I look around as an instructor, I want to see that, you know, certainly I'm going to introduce some concepts and make sure that people walk out of the room with the stated learnings that we, you know, are in the room for. But it's super important that, so my focus is really engagement and making sure that we're having conversations, especially as adults, and not just a lecture where I'm talking at you. So I think I always thrive or shine in that space where I'm standing up in front of a room giving a workshop or instructing or doing presentations. I don't shy away from the public speaking piece, but I do like my core kind of focus is always that it's a participatory process.
Amazing. So you've worked across many sectors and government. How has having worked in so many diverse industries, how has this helped you in your career, and what do you believe it has given you an edge over your competitors, and can you give us some examples?
Yeah, that's a really important point. I'm actually in the process of keeping my business intact part-time, but transitioning back into the full-time workplace, and this is why this question prompted me. because I really want to make, I just miss the workplace. I miss working with people. I miss leading teams. I miss being in an environment where good morning, instead of,
Yes.
I'm just me and my computer in the morning. But what's happening is I'm looking at these in-house talent leadership and strategic roles, and the feedback that I'm getting a lot, bar a few people, is, well, we really need somebody who's done this at this type of company, in this exact capacity. And on the same end, I listen to podcast after podcast of all these influential leaders of these great companies, and all you hear is, diversity and inclusion, beyond aesthetic diversity and cultural diversity and gender diversity, but like diversity of thought, and how important it is to have people who are going to be outside of the tribe to come in and kind of create a diverse tribe, so that, data after data reports are saying that, companies with diverse thought and diverse staff are outperforming those companies with more homogenous teams. And so it's been a difficult challenge for me to get that. So I think people want that diversity of thought and the diversity of background, but at the same time they're afraid of, like, if we step outside of the box, she's a wild card. We don't know if it sounds great, but because she hasn't done it in this exact capacity, it's probably not going to happen. So I don't know if I have an edge, because I think everybody has an edge in some way. They have an edge over me because they've done the same thing or from the same background. But I think that I bring a unique perspective because I've seen how different processes operate in different sectors, and being affable to change and to being able to easily pivot and go from one sector or one industry or one role or one capacity to another, and wearing multiple hats and having exposure to so many different people in so many different levels. When you go into an environment where you can do that, you much more easily can communicate with people at different levels. And, one of the biggest challenges in HR and people development is taking this high level business strategic vision or goal from the executive and then group, and filtering that down all the way to the front lines. And so I think when you've had as much exposure as I've had to different people and different processes and different functions of how organizations operate, you are much more able to communicate with people, to meet people where they're at, to get people to see toward a common goal, where somebody who's more fixed, maybe that's as far as they can go. This is all they've ever done. That's all they've ever known. And so maybe that's their limit, where with me, I don't have a limit. I can just keep growing and changing with an organization. So I think that's a value add that my diverse experience brings versus someone who might have only done just one thing.
Amazing.
I don't know if that made sense. With that, I might have talked around that a bit.
No, it makes 100% sense.
You're cutting out a little bit. I'm back in invader mode.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry. So that leads me to the last question. What are your 3 key pieces of advice you would give other entrepreneurs, and what do you want to leave? What would you like your legacy to be?
Okay, great. So for a solopreneur, not someone who's starting like a business with a big team and brick and mortar or products and services or e-commerce, but a solopreneur, someone who wants to go into consulting or coaching, I would say if you're gainfully employed full-time, stay with your full-time engagement until your business is well off the ground and it gets to a point where you can't manage both and do both successfully. I think sometimes, myself included, we kind of jump into the pool, and a lot of the programs that train and certify folks bait and switch you a little bit about, the prospects, and it's much, much harder to generate revenue and to make what you might have been making in your previous role right out the gate. So I would say that would be the first piece of advice, is really do as much as you can to operationalize your business while you're still employed, and hustle hard for that way instead of hustling hard without that full-time job. The second piece that I give to small business entrepreneurs is do your research. So one thing is, you might have a great idea, but don't assume that your idea is going to generate a lot of revenue. because that might not be the case. So you really have to do your market research and see, this is a great idea. Is it going to make money? And what proof do you have before you throw everything into it or get committed to this idea? Do a lot of research so that you know there's a need for your product. And on the same end, so you have folks who have this really altruistic idea that they really love. Well, don't be married to it because you don't know if it's going to generate revenue, so figure that out first. But then on the flip side, the third piece of advice is don't go into business like just to make money. So it's because it's very good chance that if you're solely focused on, I want to make money, what can I do to make money? Your business will probably fail. So, you know, be connected to the idea and then be smart about whether or not it's a revenue generating idea. But if you go into it with money first, idea last, you're bound to kind of not get your feet off the ground. And for my legacy, I want to be somebody that has inspired growth and change and improvement in your life. And you know, if I'm not even recognized for that, or no one ever says my name, but you know, every person I've had contact with, you know, 100 different people, let's say, have done something because of the support that I provided to them that made their life better, like that's all I need, because that legacy continues because now they're going to pay it forward.
Well, thank you so much for all your insights and the incredible journey, and you've had such a diverse career, so it's amazing. So thanks so much for sharing with the audience, and hopefully we can have you back in the future and see what you're doing moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Karen. It was great to talk to you.